Today's Tanya for Wednesday, the 8th of Teves. We're going to end the chapter 31, 8th of Adar, right? 8th of Adar, right? We're going to end off the treatment plan, the prescription of the Alter Rebbe of how to, on one hand, break the ego, but gently and ultimately to bring joy to one's raison d'etre of serving God. And I want to point out, Alan, you're going to see today, I keep telling you that your question about the description that we have of the animal soul being despicable and loathsome, being a little bit seemingly very negative.
It's not despicable. It can be despicable.
Listen, I'm trying to answer your question. That is not.
Well, I object with that assumption. Okay, so it's
we're not ending with that statement.
It needs, all right, fine, but don't use that word unless you put say it's possibly despicable. It's not always despicable. It's our glory.
You're not letting me answer, so it's hard to give your question.
I understand, but I the fundamental words you're using are also misleading.
But if you're objecting, we can't answer. So I can't.
Well, it's my ego, you would say, but it's not. My ego is not despicable.
So the language that is seemingly very harsh, I don't yet have an answer of why he's going in that language to such an extent. My guess is that since our psyche, intrinsic to our psyche, is klipa. We're born with inherent in our system klipa, selfishness, self-preservation that keeps us alive. But with that self-preservation that keeps us alive comes all the other. It comes all the other things of me, and then hurting others, all the stuff. But the goal is not to be negative. The goal, even though the Alter Rebbe used the language of the loathsome body, I don't think the goal is to beat yourself up and have a kind of a very negative view of the body and of the ego. That's not the goal. The goal is really, like all of Hasidism, is to explore the spirit, the underlying mechanics, underlying essence of stuff that we experience. Whatever you experience there's a certain underlying essence. There's a conceptual software that God makes in it. Okay, that goes to anything, good, bad, and ugly. Everything is made by God. In other words, and God doesn't just make it and walk away. Everything is made deliberately, both the hardware and the software. And we mentioned the other day, which we're going to see here today, the Alter Rebbe preempts a lot of your questions, Alan, which were not about the despicable, but about the concept of what's this about escaping the body or being harsh on the body? What's this kind of like, hating or negating the body? And today he gives a glimpse. He doesn't go to the full thesis because that'll be in chapter 35, but he references as I'm going to talk about that the goal is not about, if you could end it yesterday, you might think, if you would end your Tanya, exposure yesterday, you might think the Alter Rebbe is essentially a spiritualist. Prize the spiritual soul and don't get it and be sad and don't call the body for what it is and go embrace the soul. That's what you might think if you ended yesterday. But thank God we're doing today, and he's going to actually give us a foretaste of the full treatment of this topic from chapter 35 and on. So I just wanted to point out that your question was very prescient. That's the right word. And he's going to mention it, even though not fully deal with it yet. But even in this chapter, he's going to talk about it. Okay, so we ended yesterday. Look at the body as a lowly thing. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that. And the soul reuniting with God as an incredibly joyous thing. Mm-hmm. So inside 96, one may lend this teshuvah. We said the whole concept of looking to mitzvahs as a way of restoring the soul back to its source is teshuvah. It's return. It's restoring. It's restoration. Mm-hmm. So one may lend this teshuvah, the restoration of soul to source, additional strength. Here he tells you about additional. Yesterday we had joy. We had a joyous bottom line. Like, yeah, you might be down about your intrinsic flawedness of the body, and the flawedness of the animal soul, but be joyous about the godly soul doing mitzvahs and returning to God. But now we're going to give you but wait, there's more. We're going to give you additional joy here. Yeah. And likewise, add a greater measure of light and joy to the joy of his soul, brought about into the teshuvah. So not only going to be joyous about fulfilling the soul's raison d'etre of connecting the soul to its source, is a bonus joy. By comforting his heart from its distress and sorrow through reflecting, or the literal Hebrew would be speaking to his heart, with knowledge and understanding as follows. And here's the good talk you tell yourself. And I quote, here's what you got to tell yourself. Certainly it is true, as said above, that I am utterly remote from God, meaning my body is self-serving, and therefore it seeks its own, existence and doesn't really care so much about the godly existence. But it was not I who created myself in this manner. I didn't mess up to make a body intrinsically self-serving. And I didn't make myself, the divine souls, exiled beneath the impurity of the body and animal soul. It was God who created me in this situation. God made the human being from dust and blew into it a breath of life, a soul that was deliberate. God took the lowest elements of the lowest elements of the earth and made the body from it. And then God gave you a breath of life from his innermost breath, so to speak, to make a soul. God made the odd couple, so to speak. Okay. Why then has God done such a thing? To cause the divine soul, a part of his light which fills and encompasses all worlds and before which all is naught. So God put a piece of his essence in a soul and put it to descend into the body, which is clothed in this is a Kabbalistic term, the serpent skin, and a fetid drop. The term serpent skin refers to that once we ate, actually I'm not really sure, but I think it refers to when we ate from the tree of knowledge, that now the body became, enmeshed with a serpent skin. As I think it's the result of the snakes, bringing sin into the body and meshing it into everything. I think that's referring to. In other words, the way God made the world post Tree of Knowledge, Garden of Eden, is that you have a body, and that's the hardware. You have an animal soul, that's the software, and both of those things are laced with klipa. What's klipa? Concealment on God, because they're not concerned on their own. Key word. They're not concerned. The body and its software, the animal soul, are not concerned on their own with God. On the contrary, they're concerned with themselves, their own preservation and pleasure. And God made it like that. You didn't do anything wrong to become like that. That is the system. And at the same time, God put a piece of himself, so to speak, inside this selfish hardware and software called the body and animal soul. Surely, and this is the key word, if you end with this, you have this line, everything. Surely this ascent must be for the sake of a subsequent ascent. the fact that the body, the lowly body, is married with the lofty soul, and it kind of it covers over the lofty soul. It's a descent, but since God made it, there must be some ascent in here. Very powerful line. Mm-hmm. And what is it? He spells it out. What would that ascent be? That is to elevate to God the entire animating animal soul. Alan, this is what you're saying. The whole purpose is to elevate the animal soul, which derives from Klipat Noga, which derives from Klipa, Klipa's concealment, and also its garments of thought, speech, and action of the Klipa. How do you elevate the animal soul and the body? By means of clothing them in the action, speech, and thought of the Torah, by putting them in good garments, in good pathways back to God. And he says here, as I told you, the subject of this ascent will be discussed further on at length in chapter 35, 36, and 37. It will be shown then how this is the purpose for which the world is created. Meaning, it's not only that you're born with a handicap and you can elevate the handicap. That's the purpose of creation. It's not just about you, it's about the creation. But we'll talk about the more cosmic purpose of the soul submerged in the body to elevate it, being a cosmic elevation. But anyways, we'll get there. But right now we're talking about for yourself. If this be so, he's continuing in the first person. You're talking to yourself. If this be so, then there's one thing for me to do, you tell yourself. And this shall be my sole aim throughout my life. And that is to immerse therein the life of my spirit and soul. As it's written, to you, God, I raise my soul. Elech Hashem na'esa. And then he continues on page 98 in the Chayinu. In practical terms, this means, okay, now I know the rules of the game. What's my game plan? And it's like this: to bind my thought and speech with God's thought and speech, Torah and speaking Torah and prayer, which are in fact the very laws which have been set out before us. God gave us the Torah not just as a law book, but as a restoration book to restore the soul, to have, holy thought, the body and soul, to have a thought and speech that's God-centric. And similarly with action, I will bind my faculty of action with God's action, which is the mitzvahs. For this reason, the Torah is described as, we see in Psalms, a lot of times it describes the Torah as restorative, meshivas nafesh. The Torah restores the soul, because like we said, it restores the soul to its source. Restore means you're getting back to the place you came from, the initial, the origin state. So you're restoring the soul back to its source.
Wow.
And that's why Torah is a restorative act. Concerning this occupation of Torah mitzvahs.
Which soul is being restored? The animal soul or the
both? The answer is both. Both. Good question. Both. Today is a glimpse of this larger concept of that we're not just here to restore the divine soul along. That's the purpose. The divine soul is stuck inside the animal soul, because when it restores itself, then it also restores all the layers of the animal soul as well. And concerning this restorative act of Torah mitzvahs, this is what the verse in Psalm says: God's commandments are just, they gladden the heart. What does it mean they gladden the heart? Because, again, so here you see, even though the harsh language of hating, or not hating, but getting down, calling out, exposing the lowliness of the body, the lowliness of the animal soul, and the Yetzer Hara, because the lowliness is that they're programmed to conceal God. They're programmed for themselves, which conceals God. And that could be, small offense to big offense. But that is not your problem. That's not your fault. That's the rules of the game. And the reason is that you can then find joy in 2 steps. One is the joy of the eternal part of yourself called the soul, the divine soul. Like, okay, so I have a lowly temporal body that came from dust, will go to dust. And now I'm going to go have a little bit of, I'm going to go play golf with my divine soul by doing mitzvahs with it, I'm going to go give my divine soul some, a Torah smoothie or something, by doing Torah and mitzvahs. That's step one. That was yesterday's joy. But the even greater joy is that you should know that there's mission in the handicap. There's mission of the soul being submerged in the handicap of the lowliness of the animal soul. And that is because when this divine soul, with the free choice of the person, does Torah mitzvahs, not only is there restoration of the divine soul back to its origin, but it lifts up the animal soul and the body. And this is an example where Steinsaltz says, when you harness a ox with a plow and you put, food in front of it, right? A carrot or whatever you call it. The ox is only concerned really with the carrot, right? Mm-hmm. But because the way it's set up, that along the way it's plowing the field and creating food for the town, right? Mm-hmm. So when the godly soul can direct the animal soul, it doesn't change. The animal soul might still be selfish, but it can set up the system of that it makes a lot of good come out